Let me get my agenda back up. Thanks everyone for being here, and I apologize I'm not there in person. So we're going to start the Reno Sparks Convention Visitors Authority Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for Tuesday, May 10th, 2022 at 11:06 a.m. We'll go down to call to order, and can we get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, Andy Chapman is present. Mr. Rick Murdoch.
Here.
Not hearing you guys right now.
Uh-oh. Mr. Stephen Esquaga.
Here.
And Councilwoman Charlene Bybee is absent today.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to comments from the floor. Is there any public comments?
None at this time, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move on to item C, approval of the agenda. Are there any staff changes to the agenda?
No staff changes.
Great. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Rick, is there a second?
Second is Stephen.
Not sure if there was a second by Stephen.
Correct.
Second by Stephen.
Might be having some. Okay, thank you. Having a little bit of audio problems. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimous. I'm going to move to the approval of the meeting minutes of the Finance Facilities Committee meeting for February 11th, 2022. They are in your packet. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second. Can you hear that, Andy?
I think so. Thank
Okay,
you.
Stephen, yep.
All right. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that takes us to our presentation discussion item E1, presentation discussion and potential direction to staff regarding the capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2022-23 for the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority. I think I'm going to turn this over to either Charles or Courtney. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney Jager, who's going to walk us through the presentation.
Good morning, Courtney Jager, Vice President of Finance. Here with me today are Trent LaFerriere, our Vice President of Facilities, and Jose Martinez, our Director of Facility Operations. Today, we're presenting to you the President CEO's proposed capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2022-2023. As a reminder, approval from the Finance Committee today would be advisory only, and the capital plan will not be adopted until approved by a quorum of the full board. So first is our agenda for this presentation. We'll start off with an overview of the capital plan, review fiscal year 22 carry forward projects, and review fiscal year 23 proposed capital projects. The capital plan identifies capital improvement projects for the upcoming year. The RSCVA funds capital improvements for the Reno Sparks Convention Center and the Reno Livestock Events Center. Capital improvements for the Reno Event Center and the National Bowling Stadium are funded by the City of Reno. Annually, we assess the needs of the facilities, considering different priorities like safety and functionality, and we propose projects to address within the next year. So on the screen, we have historical capital expenditures. During the pandemic, we really pulled back on capital spending. And this year, we're proposing an increase in capital spending that we'll review in detail later in the presentation. Next, we're going to discuss carry forward capital projects to give the committee an update on current year capital projects. It's typical for capital projects to take longer than 1 year to complete. Each year, we usually have projects that overlap between fiscal years. This year, we saw additional delays due to labor shortages and supply shortages as a result of the pandemic. Even with these delays, we still plan to complete these projects, and most of them are already in progress. We aren't requesting any new funding to complete these projects. They'll be completed using the current year budget, but we did want to give the committee a status update, and Trent is going to go ahead and give you an overview of these carry forward projects.
Good morning, everybody. So on the carry forward capital, you do have all of the items on this list in your packets. So if there's anything specific you would like to discuss, please let me know. Excuse me. For the sake of conserving time, we will focus on the larger projects on this list. Halls 4 and 5 roofing systems have been identified as the sections of the roof that have begun to fail and leak, creating an event scheduling issues and safety concerns for our clients and employees. We are currently in the design and specification phase of this project and will be prepared to release the RFP as soon as the process is completed. Second in line is our security camera project. We will address the camera deficiencies and outdated surveillance equipment throughout the convention center, thus providing the necessary camera coverage to monitor the interior and exterior of the facility, providing a higher level of security for the protection of our clients and our employees. The project is also in the design and specification stage and will be ready for RFP release June 3rd. Now, we have a number of other items on there that are on this carryover list if anybody wants to discuss them, or we can move forward to our proposed capital for 22-23.
I think the only question I'd have on, and again, I don't want to get into minutia on those small, bathroom remodels, but the number seems pretty small. Does that mean, has it already been started? Is this just the remaining to
Correct.
finish up? Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Can we look at tile samples? Oh, no. Okay.
Great. All right, so next we're going to discuss. Oh, go ahead. Sorry about that.
So basically, this is, as you guys all said, it's carryover, and for instance, the front loader and all that, that's all, we needed it, it had to be done. You guys are buying it as we speak, so it's in, this is all down the road.
They're all in process to different degrees, and most of this stuff will be completed by June 30.
This is all done in June 3rd. Okay, very good.
Yeah, the majority,
Most,
just a few,
yeah.
A few will carry over in the next fiscal year.
Got it. Thank you.
Great, so if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and move forward. So annually, our capital plan is funded using room tax revenues. This year, we're proposing to spend $3 million of room tax revenues on capital projects. And as discussed in prior meetings, additional funding has been made available due to federal grant awards received as a result of the pandemic. We're proposing to spend the $2.8 million in additional funds on capital. So next, Trent is going to review our proposed fiscal year 23 capital projects in detail.
Okay, continuing with our,
Sorry. So this 3 million is coming out of the room tax, and then an additional 2.85.
Correct.
So it's the grant funding, and that's a total of five.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm a little slow.
not a problem. Okay, so on our 22-23 capital projects, again, we are going to be addressing the roofing. A recent infrared moisture scan revealed that several areas of the convention center roofing system have begun to show signs of membrane failure that has led to moisture infiltration into the insulation layer. The areas of most concern are the ballroom, the kitchen, and the B concourse roofing systems. As I'm sure you'll agree, keeping weather out of the building is vital to our operation. Second on this is the lighting control system upgrade. Completion of the lighting control system upgrade will allow our staff and the ability to operate the lighting system from a central location, providing more control and better monitoring of the energy, or for energy efficiency. This project will complete the lighting control system upgrade that has been in motion for the last several years. Another one is the HVAC Delta system upgrade. This project is similar to the previous system upgrade, in which the HVAC system will be converted to a complete direct digital control system, allowing for more precise monitoring and control of the system, which will provide a more comfortable environment for our clients and importantly, cost savings for the RSCVA through proper cooling and heating. The traffic spikes. Replacement of the traffic spikes at the designated exits will enable staff and security the ability to secure the property during paid parking events. Currently, the existing traffic spikes are disabled because of their unreliable operation. The existing spikes are no longer repairable due to the lack of replacement parts, so we need to go in with a new system. Is there any questions on that? No? We can,
Yeah, we can move on to
Trent, just one question that I have. I don't know if this is the right time for it, but if I look at these three different kind of categories, you have the carryover funds at about 2.5, the federal funds at 2.8, and then these at 3. Is it contemplated that all this work would happen within the 2022-23 year? May not be completed, but started. And do we have vendors and any vendors or labor constraints that would kind of preclude some of this from happening? That's a significant amount of capital happening. Again, I don't know if it's all planned to be done in this 1 year.
well, currently, that is our plan. We definitely always have issues with lead times and with product and employment at our vendors, but right now it looks like we should not have an issue getting these at a minimum started and most of them completed in the 22-23 fiscal year.
Great, thank you.
Continuing on, we have over at the Livestock Event Center, we've got our show panels. And the show panels are a system that is needed to protect the animals, to protect the livestock, the cows and bulls, sheep. They're in a situation now where they have degraded over time due to large animals banging into them, and we need to replace those. So that's for the safety of the animals and convenience of our clients. In the administrative area, we're looking at our marketing lounge conversion to make that into more usable office space for the employees coming on. We've got some money in there for the boardroom to improve our sound system, as we all know. The facilities branding will be going through this property, upgrading the interior, and some of the digital boards, some of the decor. We have a little bit of money for our model, our city model that we use for FAMs and conventions throughout the country, so that needs a little upgrade. And then we have a little capital reserve in there for unexpected capital items. And that's kind of where we are good at this point. Do you have any questions?
And it's more almost more of a general comment. Actually, two things. One is I do think down the road, and again, this is probably getting more in the weeds, but when you see the current sign that we have on South Virginia, the little 6-foot by 5-foot pixel.
The message center, yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a plan down the road, because I do think there's a great marketing opportunity, I think, for Reno Tahoe, period. I mean, that you're on South Virginia. I think it sells the building and also sells the destination. When you look at like with the Atlantis or ourselves down, Virginia corridor, it'd be worth looking down the road.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I saw when I first started here was it's a smaller, almost antiquated sign that it still works and it's fine. But I think when I had the conversations with Courtney and the team, I think it was a couple $1 million that we needed to upgrade that. And it certainly needs that attention, as well as some other exterior. But we're probably a year or two away before we tackle that.
Yep.
But noted.
I agree, and I get it. Priority-wise, it's probably down the road. The only other thing is, it's more of a general comment, but I know we, a couple meetings ago, when the Western Heritage Group came to kind of present their concept and their overall, I just want to reiterate one more time, and again, I'm not pushing that it's their project, but I just hope that we're having communication where we know what capital improvements, I know that there's so much federal funds, period. And it's great seeing that we've got our, is it 3 or 2.8? And again, I think we're all on different tracks for right now, but it'd be great knowing what they think they may have access to, and ultimately down the road, I kind of go back to the days of like Wild Creek and predating everybody, Northgate. That was a major challenge, working our way out from under that. I look at this similarly, that if we could ever get a partner or two to help shoulder some of these expenses and operations, it'd be great. And again, it's more of a general comment, but it'd be great kind of knowing what access funds they're looking at and what they're targeting.
Ben and I were talking about that beforehand. Last place we left it with the folks at the Heritage were, if they wanted to go in that direction, we would have to bid out the contract to do that. And so we haven't heard back from them on that. And so we're waiting to hear from them as to the next steps. George kind of reached out to me today on this week, something else, but as soon as we get more information from them as kind of where they're at, we will certainly react and update the board on that.
What I'd ask is, thank you. So you've got the Heritage Fund and you've got the university, you've got state of Nevada, and I think Stephen's point, well made, is that we got opportunity to kind of spread out the risk. That's a good point. Good word. Anyway, just so we could get down the road with that, I know they said that, they possibly, them running it and then us help them facilitate might be better served for revenues capture back, and because we all know that the rodeos seem to always have money, and we always ask that question. They've got skin in the game, and then university's growing. They've got skin in the game. So maybe it's, we get a private-public kind of relationship that funds these things, and we get that livestock event center where we need it to be, and everybody's a winner.
Andy,
Courtney, was there
anything on
any,
your side before we
Trent,
move
was
on to
there-
the next?
No, I was just gonna see if there was anything else from staff, and if there was any other discussion on the board. I believe you're looking for a recommendation to the board on this capital plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have one more item to present in relation to the proposed capital projects that we're planning to use our additional funding made available by the grant, and Trent's going to go over those quickly, and then after that, we'd be looking for questions or a motion.
We good? Okay, so this is going to utilize the grant money of the $2.84 million. And so what we're looking at is roofing systems. We have identified more of the roof due to the infrared scans, and this is going to be replacing the deteriorated lobby and the meeting room roofing systems. They are in a similar condition to the rest of them. The deal at the convention center, because we have such a large roofing system, is we kind of go in rotation. So as you get one done, you go to the next one, continue around, and by the time you get around to that last one you started previously, you start that rotation again. So that will be required. The air walls. We've got air walls in there that are 20 plus years old. They're large, they're 36 foot tall. We utilize those in and out constantly for different setups on the rooms, and we want to make sure that the mechanical systems on those are safe and reliable so that the employees can operate those safely. The exhibit hall painting. The exhibit halls, all 5 halls, the last time they have seen paint was 20 plus years ago, and they are in need of some upgrade, and that will also help with the lighting that we did a few years back. We went in there and did all LED lighting. It's kind of a muddy, creamy color to the walls, and we want to brighten those up and make them white so it's a better environment for the customers and clients. Lighting upgrades, we've got a number of backhaul areas, stairwells. Some of these areas, the lights are on 24/7. We want to take those away from fluorescents, go with LEDs. The LEDs are going to give you anywhere from, on average, an 85% increase in your power savings, especially because they're being used all the time, and it also gives us better lighting, and it makes a safer environment. We have some very old vehicles over there, and 20-plus years old, the pickups and the van, and so we're looking at replacing just a couple of them, not going through the entire fleet, but we want to make sure that those are safe and reliable for the employees to utilize for running parts. Electrical upgrades, and this is over at RSLEC. We need to install a new transformer in the electrical room so that we can utilize the power needs for clients coming in, and that would include the possibility of the scoreboard and also power drops so that the clients can get power to their venue without having cords strung out all over the building and taping them down and causing trip hazards. Just mentioned the power drops and the scoreboard. Boardroom in here, again, is the AV equipment. Marketing corner, we just...
Yep, we are.
Sorry, we went through that. So anyway, that's what I have on this. So do we have any questions concerning the grant money?
So the city of Reno, we charge ourselves $2 for our funding downtown for our buildings. This is grant money. So was this grant money specific for the two buildings, or was it for all venues that RSCVA run? I'm not asking for saying that they need millions of dollars. I'm saying, should have this money been distributed through all the buildings, or was it up to the city of Reno to file for the grant?
So this grant specifically was to reimburse us for operating expenditures for all 4 facilities during the pandemic. In this capital plan, we followed our typical capital funding model where we fund convention center and livestock events center improvements. So that's why only those 2 properties are in this plan.
Right. My question is, for instance, we needed a new projector. Should that have been done in the grant? I mean, I'm thinking, because I could go back to the city of Reno, and I'm going to say, hey, Doug, should you guys have asked for a grant for our shuttered venue? Because I'm just saying, just trying to make a fair playing field. And I'm not saying we need millions of dollars downtown. We don't. We've got a $2 fund for that. But was this venue money for downtown?
It was. So with this capital plan, the purpose of presenting this to the Finance Committee is that we can take suggestions and definitely make modifications to this. The city of Reno wouldn't have been eligible to apply for this specific grant because it was only for operators of facilities. So the operator who absorbs the losses was able to apply for the grant. But if it is the suggestion of the committee that this is revised and not taken to the full board as is, that we're able to work that out in this setting.
I would just ask Trent what, in all fairness, I'm saying the majority of it should be spent out south, I have no doubt about it. But is there something that needs to be done immediately downtown that should come out of this grant? So I'll leave that to you guys to discuss, because I would recommend passing this, but also I'd recommend looking at,
Yeah, and it's a great point, Rick. I think one of the things that we're not showing this subcommittee is for the overall improvements that we were looking at for just the facilities, it was about $6 to $7 million. So what I asked the team to do is to go back and rank by priority what needed the most attention, which you get to the roofing system. If this committee does want to move into that, projector, which I think, Rick, was what, 250? Yeah. I think what we were looking at, we would just have to reprioritize some of the other things that we have, and then we can update that and submit that back to the board for approval here next Thursday.
I'm not trying, I just want a fair play. And so I can report back to Doug Thornley, the city of Reno, hey, there was a grant here, but you guys own the buildings, but RSCVA does run them. So I just want to avoid any, somebody's going to bring it up.
So Trent, let me pose the question to you. If we wanted to put that 250 in for the projector at bowling, from a priority standpoint of what we're proposing on this, what would fall off that list?
I would suggest taking the scoreboard over at RSLEC off that list. That would free up some good funding for other projects downtown. And then just on a side note, the projector, we just ordered the components to get that up and operating for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It still needs to be replaced, but at least we're functional for this meeting, and that was right around $5,000.
Yeah, and that's really Band-Aid, like we did with the bowlers the last time out. It needs that 250 that we know we
Exactly.
need
I
to
would
do.
just hate to see you guys having to Band-Aid that thing other than we just buy a new one for $250, call it a day, and then everybody, there's a piece of the puzzle that I keep everybody happy.
Yeah, I think that what we can do is we'll update to put in the 250 for
You
the
can
for
look
the
at it.
projector, and we will remove the scoreboard update for now, and that hopefully gets us to where we need for that meeting.
I think so.
I'd be open I think that's a good compromise on that.
And you've got a bowling congress in '23, right? 40,000 bowlers coming, so timing's probably.
Right. I'm assuming the lead time on that, again, I don't know the details on the projector, but what would you say, 6 months? Or no?
That sounds like a good guesstimate.
So just to confirm, so I know we haven't made the motion yet, but does the committee approve this as is with replacing the RSLEC scoreboard with the projector? Any other suggestions to this list, or is everyone all right with bringing this to the full board as is?
I think it looks good. Obviously, it changes that number. I mean, we have probably a little squishy, right? 150,000 or so. What was I gonna? Oh, this is real small, but I'm assuming do we reach out with like NV Energy on just some of the rebate opportunities in that on?
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
Great.
In all buildings, right, Trent? For considering all four of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Andy, any other comments from
So
you?
if I'm hearing, no, I'm just, if I'm hearing correctly, it's we're looking for a recommendation to the board with the one change, removing the scoreboards at the LEC and adding the projector, which would also add a little bit of contingency fund, and maybe that's a good way to put that in there unless there is another project that would come into play. So if that's the case, I'd be looking for a motion to recommend to the full board.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there a second?
Second, Rick.
You guys got to do all the heavy lifting down there, and then any other additional comment? I just had one. If I look at these kind of three buckets, we're spending over $8 million in kind of capital investment. I think that's a great story to tell and get out to the community, as well as obviously to the kind of the business industry, that these funds are being committed and improving the product and really investing back in. It's a big number and it's a great story. So I would encourage maybe working with Ben to get that message out there, and obviously through Mike and the team as well. So any other final comments?
No, Andy, that's a good point, and we'll work with Ben to help push that out. It's good news for the community.
Yeah. Okay, great. So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. All right, we are going to move on. Oops, sorry, I just lost my agenda. We're going to move on to item B2, presentation, discussion, and potential direction to staff regarding the budget for fiscal year 2022-23 for the RSCVA. Back to you, Charles, to start.
All right, we're going to go through the budget, proposed budget for next year. Kudos to Courtney and team who have put this together. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney, who has a presentation for the subcommittee to review. Courtney?
Good morning, Courtney Jager, Vice President of Finance. Today I'm presenting to you the President and CEO's proposed budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. As a reminder, approval from the Finance Committee today would be advisory only, and the budget will not be adopted until it's approved by a quorum of the full board. So first is our agenda for this presentation. We'll start off by reviewing the funding policies in place per the strategic plan. Then we'll review general fund revenues and resources, general fund expenses, and review the RSCVA's other funds. I'll move through this presentation at a good pace, but feel free to stop and ask questions anytime. So our budget is largely guided by,
Sorry,
oh yeah.
I'm so sorry, Courtney. But before, just saying that, does this reflect pretty much what the packet that we were?
Same order, yeah.
Okay.
It's just basically a summary of the packet.
Okay,
And
thank you.
And I can always point out what pages in the packet to look
Okay.
at as well. All right, so moving on. The budget is largely guided by the board's funding policies per the strategic plan. So we'll start with a discussion of how those policies will be addressed in this budget. The first strategic funding policy is related to general fund reserves. This policy has been in place for several years and calls for unassigned ending fund balance to be at a minimum of 10% of general fund expenditures. In this budget, that would call for an unassigned fund balance at about $4 million. The budget supports and exceeds that amount, but ending fund balance depends on activity throughout the year. We reconcile fund balance at year end, and each year we report back to the board that audited final figure. In the new upcoming strategic plan, we're proposing an increase to this policy of 15 to 17% starting in fiscal year 24 in support of continued organizational stability. The next strategic funding policy is the capital reserve account. The ending fund balance in the capital projects fund will be over $1 million and meet this goal. Next is the sinking fund. The previous strategic plan called for contributions to the sinking fund if room tax revenues were in excess of $22 million. This is not budgeted given that it's no longer required as a result of the last bond refunding. This also won't be part of the financial policies in the upcoming strategic plan. Next is the rainy day fund. The current balance meets the board's financial policies of $1 to $2 million. We're striving for an increase of 10 to 20% in this upcoming fiscal year to continue towards that goal of $2 million. Next is annual capital funding, which we reviewed in detail during the previous agenda item. And last are board initiatives. The two current board initiatives to be funded in this budget are air service and special events. Air service funding was established in the previous strategic plan, and we are planning to establish special event funding in the upcoming new strategic plan. This year, we're proposing $1 million in air service and $1 million in special event funding. We have historical spend on the screen. So next, we'll talk about general fund revenues and resources, which is how the budget is funded.
Can you go back?
Yes.
Thanks. Back again.
Oh, sure.
Well, on the air service fund, we're taking it down from $1 million to $1 million from $1.5 million?
Yeah, so in the current fiscal year 22, we budgeted at $1 million. In fiscal year 23, we're budgeting it again at $1 million, but we can go up to 1.5 per the board's policies.
Does that, where does that $500,000 go? Does it sit in reserves? Is that kind of how it?
So the air service fund was never set up as an actual separate fund. It's something that we budget every year as part of our operating expenses. So if we don't spend it, we consider those resources as we carry forward fund balance into the next year. But we haven't budgeted $1.5 million in that fund since pre-pandemic. So those resources were reallocated in a different year and then built up in the next years.
No, I just wanted to add, I think, I'm trying to think how many legislative sessions ago we were able to get that $1.5 million earmark, maybe 3 sessions, was it? I'd say.
When Nat was here.
Yeah. And I don't mean this as anything towards staff here. I think when we got it, and we all have the right intent, and but I don't think we've really mastered how do we really get we have RASC, we kind of are sitting in neutral of like if the right opportunity comes. I do think, and this is more of a board discussion and part of the strategic plan, but it would be great to really get Christina in the room, get everybody around and saying, how, for example, how do we take $500,000 and say, we're gonna go into Southern California and we're just gonna, top of mind digital media and again, I don't know if it's that, but really use this as it was intended.
So and part of that is history, right? And learning that. I think before I got here, it was at 1.5. We funded it at $1 million last year, which the board approved. And really, it's an opportunity for minimum revenue guarantees or other new service that's coming to the area. when talking to the airport folks, it hasn't been touched since 18, when JetBlue came and we did some things around that. So the question is this the intent of the subcommittee to increase that to go back to 1.5? We do have spending, whether we're going through RASC or our own initiatives through marketing, to elevate what we're doing through that, but not necessarily on this fund. This fund has really been a placeholder for new airlift that we would then support under guarantees or specific programs. So it's a little different than what you're mentioning.
The only thing I don't know if I'd say correct, but give you my perception on it is, I don't know if it's necessarily, it was very general, and maybe that was not a great move. I didn't take it that it was necessarily had to be new air service, but it could be existing, it might be a winter campaign, again, out of a market that we feel we're strongly served. But again, I think, and honestly, we may want to try to stretch it in certain ways where we're sitting with a specific airline saying, you know, Southwest, you're our number one carrier. You come up with half, we'll come up with half, and we'll do a winter campaign. But I don't think we've really gotten our head around how to use it in getting creative. But truly, and I don't want to just burn it, but I think, you know, the importance of air service into this market, we may want to get creative and go, how do we spend $1 million of it and really, and maybe leverage it into more than that with other partners?
It's interesting because you're on your blurb that you send out, you know, the daily Southwest, and I talked to the general manager of Southwest yesterday. They're looking at going back into hub protection. They're looking at hubs. What I'm thinking out loud is we've sat with it. We haven't used it, to your point. I don't think we've known how to use it, but it'd be time for us to go to Southwest. They're the gorilla in town, saying, hey, how can we help you out in a social media plan, or can we go with your frequent flyers? How can we use that money to help drive bodies onto the planes? And even coming into like events, you got Burning Man or any of these big events in Reno that we live off air service, in Tahoe as well. When I say this, I mean Reno, Tahoe, that we use that money up because it just disintegrates every year. In other words, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it seems like we earmarked it. We might as well get creative and Stephen and I are both, I look at me and Stephen and I as that we're on RASC, so we should be able to tell RASC, hey, we got to get a little better here at this, and how do we use this money? Because we're all partners.
And these are great points. I think one of the things that I did when we went through the process is I went to the airport and I said, hey, we've got $1 million sitting there. You know, give us some ideas what you would do if we were to go and to spend that. And really, I was thinking about the air service and how we get that, but they had some ideas about what we could do with current programs. And so, Rick, to your point, that's something that, you know, if we get direction from the board to say, hey, let's not hold that for new service, let's figure out that we want this organization to spend it, we will spend it, and we will find ways to do that. It was just our understanding that we're holding that, and we don't want to get caught flat-footed, that if midway through a fiscal cycle, there's a new opportunity, and we're then caught flat-footed without funding. So I think it's more of a philosophical discussion that might be healthy.
To that point, though, and Stephen, you'll remember this, when we knew we were going to land JetBlue, every property put up an additional $25,000 or whatever it was. You remember that, Stephen? We all got taxed on that side of it with the RASC. So that's, again, we not only give it our tax dollars out here, but we also double dip when we gave RASC. We get charged by RASC every month, and then we gave an additional for the air service from New York. So it'd be nice to kind of spread the wealth a little bit there and use it. So we.
Hey, I'm going to jump in here real quick. I think we're getting down a little bit of a rabbit hole that is outside of it's a good conversation about how we spend those dollars. I think the question here is, are we directing staff to try to target 1.5 million or 1 million? But I think we should take that discussion onward, but we probably need to do that outside of the budget conversation. So if you guys are good with that, I think we could discuss with staff or discuss here, do we think we should get that to 1.5 and then have that ability to have that conversation? That's I think the item we're talking about.
Well, could we just take that back to the board on the budgeting process? Because that's what this is.
Yeah, so as part of this committee process, we're
yes.
able to take recommendations. So if the recommendation of the Finance Committee was to move this to 1.5 million, then in the draft that goes to the board, it would be increased to 1.5 million.
And then the only thing
I
that
guess the only thing I would also add, sorry, just the last thing I would add there as well is I don't think we don't lose the money. So if we don't use it, it just gets absorbed. That's some of the carryover funds. I think that's correct.
Absolutely.
Right, Courtney?
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, so we're not losing the dollars. And the other question I would just have is, was the surcharge legislation specific for this use, and was it specific at $1 million, or was there ambiguity there?
There was ambiguity. So the surcharge legislation allows us to carry out certain initiatives, including initiatives outlined in the strategic plan. So this funding was outlined in the previous strategic plan, and that's how it's carried forward.
Yeah, so hey, Andy, I want to sort of pile on. I was going to make that point. So the air service funding, I know Stephen referenced the statutory change a few sessions ago. That statutory change was to authorize the surcharge, and it says that the surcharge gets spent in accordance with an adopted strategic plan. And at the time the board adopted that initial strategic plan for surcharge funding, they created this air service fund. So, you know, technically we don't have to have the air service fund. We just need to spend that surcharge money in accordance with the strategic plan. So if the idea is we sort of expand what that air service fund can be used for, the committee and the board are free to do that. We don't have any sort of statutory requirements as it relates to this air service fund.
And if I can just kind of give some context. So going back to the subcommittee, if you want to move that we go to 1.5 instead of 1, we can adjust. One of the things that in the planning process is we wanted to make sure that we got our pre-pandemic marketing spend back up to 100%. And at $1 million on the airport line item, we're at 99% to spend, and Courtney's going to go through it, including that 1.25 from the state of Nevada. So if we do increase this, we're going to have to balance that and probably draw down a little bit on the marketing spend. But at the end of the day, we can use those monies on either side to be able to get to that number.
You know, and I think it's a good discussion. I'm good with what you're proposing. I do think it kind of tees up the discussion of we'll have another effort on how do we take that 1 million and really stretch it and make it work. Yeah.
And we also can say we're meeting quarterly. So if we go through an augmentation, 3 months into the new fiscal, we can absolutely increase that to service that.
And what you're saying, if you have...
Yeah, my point would be, sorry, Rick, my thought is we haven't spent $1 million. So let's first target getting that spent before I think I would support a move to 1.5 because, again, it's going to have ramifications to the rest of the budget. And if we can, I'd like to turn it back over to Courtney so she could finish her presentation.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more thing.
There's going to be other elements that are going to bring additional conversation.
I have one more point to make here. Thanks, Andy. I agree with Stephen. Let's use the $1 million, but also let's go out and advertise back to the entity that we work with, the RASC and the airport. Guys, we have the ability to do $1 million, but if we get the right deal, we can go another 500,000. I just want us to be able to know that we can move and not have to worry about it.
Great. All right. So moving on, we'll talk about general fund revenues and resources, which is how the budget is funded. So this is the composition of general fund revenues and resources for the budget year compared to pre-pandemic. The largest portion of our revenues is room tax, which consists of the collections and the tourism surcharge. Next are facility revenues, and the next highest component is carry forward fund balance, which is essentially amounts that we budgeted in this current fiscal year 22, and won't be spending in the current year based on estimates performed at the time the budget was prepared. This consists of, again, the unspent air service funding, a portion of special event funding, unspent portions of the transition budget. This also consists of fiscal year 22 revenues that are anticipated to come in above budget during the last quarter of the fiscal year or be collected after year end. Carry forward amounts are almost always a component of our budget and are $4.8 million this year. Other revenues are $1.3 million. They consist of certain administrative fees we collect and smaller revenues generated by the departments. In total, revenues and resources for fiscal year 23 are $54.7 million compared to $53.1 pre-pandemic, with part of that difference being primarily due to one-time grant funding that we've discussed in previous board meetings and will discuss later in this presentation. And the next slides will review in detail our revenue estimates. So first, we'll review our budget for room tax revenues. These were estimated using trend analysis over average daily room rates, collections in prior periods, market segment trends, and other economic considerations. We prepared and reviewed different scenarios, and ultimately we decided to be moderately conservative. In the current year, room tax revenues are trending at 108% of pre-pandemic, and our total budget for this upcoming year is over 98% of pre-pandemic. Like I mentioned in the budget book, currently there are economic indicators at the national level that frequently predict a recession, but the local economy continues to perform really well with trends that are better than national averages like our unemployment rate. If we find that revenues are coming in under budget, internally we would adjust our budget and react quickly. If we find that revenues are over budget, we would come to the subcommittee and request an augmentation to spend those revenues. So overall, we're still in somewhat uncertain times, but an emphasis is being placed on being proactive and reacting quickly when necessary. So here we have historical RSCVA room tax revenues. Pre-pandemic, we were seeing steady increases. Fiscal year 19 set a record for room tax revenues. Revenues dipped during the pandemic, but still performed well overall. This year, we're on track for really strong numbers. And again, fiscal year 23 is still moderately conservative, just under those fiscal 19 figures. So next, we'll review room tax statistics. Our increases in room tax revenues have been heavily driven by ADR. Year-to-date, ADR is about 20% higher than pre-pandemic, and total occupancy percentages are lower than pre-pandemic. You'll see again, we took a moderate approach. We budgeted for a slight decrease in ADR. We're still adjusting and figuring out what the new normal is for those rates. In the last month on the national level, consumer spending increased, but we don't know how sustainable that is against continued increased inflation. We could see a tipping point reached, which would drive consumers to start looking for deals or be less willing to pay higher prices, which is going to drive down those ADRs. So again, we watch those trends really closely and we adjust our predictions as needed. Here's a breakdown of total taxable room revenues by market segment. We've seen a slight shift in trends. Most notably, vacation rentals are seeing a lot of growth. Pre-pandemic, vacation rentals were about 5% of total taxable room revenues. Year-to-date, they're 9%. Last year, they were 12%. During the pandemic, hotel and occupancy restrictions were a big driver related to that increase, but we do think it's sustainable and that vacation rentals will continue to trend really strongly. So here we have a comparison of facility revenues by facility and category. That is the same chart that is in the budget book. For facility rental revenues, we used the estimates provided by the sales department and taking into account the 2023 USBC Open Tournament. One change to note related to food and beverage revenues is that we're now going to be presenting these net instead of gross. Basically, the bottom line is the same, but under the ASM contract, given how the contract was administered, we reported gross revenues and gross expenses. Now, per relevant accounting standards, we'll present those amounts net. Or just want to make the committee aware, since our financial statements will look a little different going forward. These concessions and catering revenue estimates were provided by Aramark, but we're still finalizing the contract terms with Aramark. We expect to receive a revised budget after the terms are finalized. Aramark prepared this budget as part of the RFP before they came into their detailed walkthrough as part of being awarded the contract. So overall, we expect some changes, but no large swings to that net number that you're seeing. So for other revenues, those consist of parking revenues, audiovisual revenues, internet charges, and other services. We budgeted those based on the current trends that we're seeing. Significant items to note overall here are that in 2019, we hosted 2 major citywide conventions, which were Interbike and Safari Club. So convention center revenues were up due to those. And in 2023, the USBC Open tournament returns to Reno, and the National Bowling Stadium revenues are reflective of that tournament. Here's a comparison of facility revenues in total by facility compared to prior years. Again, we've already discussed what the major differences are compared to pre-pandemic, but you can see a nice 5-year trend there. We'll talk about facility expenses in detail later in the presentation, but I wanted to give the committee an overview of our loss projections for the year compared to prior years. And again, you do have that in your budget book to review as well. So here we have our additional revenues and resources. Other revenues, again, consist of certain administrative fees and smaller revenues generated by the individual departments. This year, other revenues includes the amounts paid to the RSCVA by the hotels for bowlers as a result of the 2023 Open Tournament. We also have our $1.25 million grant award from Travel Nevada. To receive that grant award, marketing will need to create and submit a spending plan to Travel Nevada. They plan to do that over the summer with the goal of receiving the grant revenues to spend during fall 2023. Again, here's that $2.8 million that we discussed as part of the capital improvement plan. And lastly is carry forward fund balance, which we've discussed in detail, resulting in expenses that are coming in under budget and revenues that will be coming in over budget.
Courtney, when we say spend it in fall of 2023, fiscal 2020?
Oh, sorry, fiscal year, yeah. So actually calendar year 2022, but fall of that fiscal year.
It's going to be needs periods based, and once we submit, according to the grant, we have 90 days to spend that money.
You said it's for 22, right?
Yeah, calendar year 2022 spent during fiscal year 23.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
For instance, when you do a quake, and I'm just asking, on the bowling stadium when you got the open in,
Yes.
does that site fee go to, how does it go? Does it go to the operating expense or does it go to?
Absolutely.
Do
So
you treat it like Safari Club or do you treat it like when we do the site fee? Because again, and do you give, when we pay the rebate back, you know, all the hotels pay the rebate back to RSCVA, does that go into that number or how does that work?
absolutely. So the site fees that we pay to USBC, they are not reflected in those numbers, given that they're considered expenses of the sales department, similar to other concessions that we pay. So those won't be reflected in these numbers. The revenues generated by the hotels, sales manages those agreements as well. So those would be reflective in sales/operating numbers, right? And so the overall lineage revenues are reflected in these numbers, as well as all of the true operating costs of the event.
So, and then the sales department gets the site fee and the revenue back to offset it.
Yeah, we do.
Do you do lineage or do you put lineage towards the operations?
Lineage goes towards the facility revenues. Those have always been charged there historically. There have been years where the hotel rebates were charged, some years to sales, some years to facilities. In these numbers, I've adjusted for that so that you're looking at true comparisons year to year. Exactly, yeah. So these have all been adjusted for the inconsistencies in prior years. All right, so if there's no other questions on revenues, we'll move on to general fund expenses. So here we have an overview of general fund expenses by department. Marketing is the highest department, and that's partially due to the $1.25 million in grant funding that will be spent in marketing this year. Here we have the composition of expenses by department compared to pre-pandemic. You'll see that our distribution of resources ended up being very similar to pre-pandemic. 3 highest departments are marketing, facilities, and sales. Here we have a breakdown of those same general fund expenses by function. The change that jumps out the most is payroll. During our contract with ASM, we were required to report all of their expenses as supplies and services expenses. And now, since we're taking the facility operations back in-house, expenses will be reported in their true categories. On the next slides, we'll go over detailed comparisons and breakout by each functional expense category. So here we have the breakdown of payroll and related expenses. Facilities are 40% of our payroll and sales is 30%. Again, going forward, these numbers will reflect facilities staff, which were previously reflected as contractual costs to the RSCVA. Some of the objectives this year within payroll include creating new positions. For example, the Director of Sales for the National Bowling Stadium, which is a position that will be responsible for effectively selling our area as a destination for bowling groups and tournaments.
Is that one full? I mean, did we fill
Full
that?
time. No, not full. It's still out.
Okay.
We also listened to the board's request related to focusing on the marketing of our facilities, and that objective will be supported by hiring a dedicated marketing manager for the facilities. We've also created a senior director of sales and events position to help direct and manage sales and events staff at our facilities.
Have we hired any of those? May I ask?
Senior director of sales and events has been hired. Director of sales and marketing manager, those are still in the hiring process.
Yeah, they're in the process right now. And I would say when it came to the bowling question that you had, we've been holding off until we got the agreement with the bowling folks to tap into their resources. So once we get to the May 19th meeting, we're going to turn back to USBC to try to help fill that role for the director of sales for the MBS.
Great. So other initiatives within payroll, there will also be COLA and merit increase opportunities made available for staff. One thing I also wanted to point out is that we're still in the process of remarketing our insurance benefits. You'll recall from our previous renewal that it was really difficult to find interested insurers, given that we had more retirees than active employees. Since that situation's changing, we're attempting to remarket our insurance. It's a very tight turnaround since we're providing information to the carriers as we're bringing on new staff, but we're hoping to hear back within the next few weeks. Right now, benefits are estimated. So next is services and supplies. 72% of this are facility costs. Again, the total category is decreasing because this previously was where all of ASM's expenses were charged. Now true services and supplies and services costs will be charged within this line item. We have a breakout of what those costs look like for the facilities, the highest being utilities, next highest being event service expenses, which is basically temp labor and any temporary event-specific costs like security costs and rentals. Next would be professional services. The highest costs there are contracted security. We're currently out to RFP for our security services, so these were estimated. Then the last three categories are repairs and maintenance, operating supplies, and Aramark's food and beverage management fees. This is also where we charge our general liability insurance expenses. We're expecting increases this year, basically due to difficult market conditions and a competitive cyber liability market. We've actually implemented a lot of new controls related to cybersecurity to help us get a more attractive quote. We're still waiting to hear back from the carriers, and negotiations are in process. Within this line item, the remainder of the expense is related to professional services, supplies, dues, and legal fees. Travel and entertainment is budgeted at 108% of pre-pandemic levels. 84% of travel is related to the sales department. You'll also see small increases in travel and entertainment for other areas, the purpose of which was to provide opportunities for staff networking and professional development. So next we have promotions and advertising. As a whole, this category is at 117% of pre-pandemic levels. The advertising portion is at 99% of pre-pandemic levels, including that $1.2 million being spent from grant funding. This is also where the $1 million in air services is budgeted, and this year we've allocated resources to facilities marketing initiatives too. Other larger items within this category include website costs, production costs, and public relations costs. Special projects is where the organization has historically budgeted special event funding, event sponsorships, commitments, and related costs. Highlights within this line item include the site fees for the 2023 USBC Open Championships, a maximum of $250,000 for Miss USA as recently approved by the Board of Directors, $1 million in special event funding, and the remaining $1 million is within the sales department and primarily supports event commitments, sponsorships, and other costs. Yes. So the apportionment represents the amounts that we grant to the Incline Village Crystal Bay Visitors Bureau based on collections in Washoe B. This increase is heavily driven by vacation rentals, as we discussed earlier. Next, we'll quickly review the RSCVA's other funds. First is the capital fund. The capital improvement plan was presented and approved separately. Next is the insurance fund. Expenses in this fund were already covered during our discussion of payroll-related benefits. As you're aware, we have a separate fund that accounts for employee benefit and workers' compensation activities. Fund balance in this fund is generally minimal. In fiscal year 19, we had a slight increase. This year, we'll have a slight decrease. A lot of these figures are based on estimates since we're remarketing our benefits. And lastly is the debt service fund. Transfers to the debt service fund are budgeted at $8.1 million after principal and interest payments. Outstanding debt will be as follows at June 30th, 2023. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up for
That's
questions.
outstanding. What was the year where you, was it 2 years ago you refinanced?
Yeah, we refinanced in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 19, so we've had substantial
What a
savings.
great- man.
So outstanding, this is all we owe?
Yes.
Just saying, Stephen, we're both looking at it going,
Yeah, we're definitely in a good shape from that perspective. So I can go ahead and open it up for any other questions now.
on the, what was I gonna ask you? On the, us losing, when we changed the managerial of the facilities from ASM to, are we going to realize any of that savings? Is there some savings there that we will realize, Courtney?
Yeah, the first year, Courtney can expand upon this, but the first year, we're going to see actually probably a slight increase in costs, but that's just due to the transition. We will realize savings over time. Courtney, do you want to expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the first year, there's certain contracts that were executed by ASM that will be carrying out till they're terminated and then reevaluating those. There's certain services that we want to bring back in-house, which we would recognize savings from. We also need to really build back up our staffing levels. ASM had a really high level of turnover, which results in higher professional services costs for us because we're outsourcing services that we used to have the expertise to do in-house. So definitely in that first year, I think we're going to see higher costs, also catching up on deferred repairs and maintenance that ASM had, but long-term, we'll gain efficiencies and be able to see cost savings. We also do need to see facility revenues continue to increase. That's contributing to the loss number being very similar to other years.
And if I may ask, that if I remember, I'm just rounding, but we used to lose 3.5 pre-ASM.
We did.
And eventually we'll get back to that number.
So in fiscal year 19, pre-pandemic, we lost 3.7 million, and facility revenues were at 7.9 million. This year, facility revenues are only 5.3 million. So, as much efficiencies as we can gain on the expense side, we really need to see the revenues being driven by the sales department and other events coming in.
And I would say the other variable is just the cost of business, higher salaries and other costs that we can't do. But to Courtney's point, I think our efforts are around increasing those revenues, and those dedicated salespeople will hopefully get us back.
No, I just wanted to say, even getting the packet earlier and going through it the last couple of days, it really well done and dumbed down for my level to where you do a nice job walking you through the process. And I love, and again, I don't know if the rest of the board feels this way, but even just the pie chart of revenues to expenditures, but it is impressive seeing that. I was on like late 90s, and if you want to go back and see, it'll make you go white on our fiscal situation back then, but to see that debt come down and really nice job on everybody's part.
That's great.
Andy, any comments from you on Zoom? Andy, are you still there?
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Courtney, on the COLA, I think I read in the packet that there was a 4% increase, or I read someplace about a 4% increase. I'm not sure if that was the COLA or if that was an anticipated kind of performance merit.
So-
But one question on that, given the high inflation, anything that is not matching that increased inflation is really a decrease. So could you just comment on that? And then I have two other questions.
Absolutely. So in fiscal year 23, we are planning for a 4% COLA increase program for staff and a merit increase program. We do realize that the 4% COLA is below the national average for inflation, which is over 7%. But in total, by reinstating merit increases and having the additional COLA program, we are hoping to help get salaries where they need to be to address those increasing costs.
Great, because obviously staffing issues and, the cost of everything continues to go up, so I appreciate that. My second question is on the total revenue for 22-23. It's about an 8% decrease off of last year, recognizing it's 99 point whatever off of fiscal year pre-pandemic 18-19. That 8% decrease to the current year seems a little too aggressively on the conservative side. Are there thoughts, obviously, as we look at, when actuals come in, things are adjusted, those dollars become available and potentially rolled over. But is there an appetite with this committee to be a little more aggressive? At least I would encourage us to be a little bit more aggressive and maybe bring that 8% down a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
So we can certainly open that up for discussion. We were planning to follow the same process as last year, where we meet quarterly with the Finance Committee. And if we find that revenues are exceeding budget, we would suggest an augmentation to spend those revenues. So we could either increase our revenue estimates now or continue forward with these, knowing that we will review it quarterly.
Any thoughts from the rest of the committee?
The 2 points I don't know if we've seen some April numbers, not that we're going to dictate our decision on April. Okay. I kind of like the idea of this is just my take, sit tight, but in I have no problem in a quarter even looking. I think we're at a funny place right now where this next quarter, even into the fall, I think is going to be telling. But I don't disagree with you, Andy. If we were airing, we're probably a little tight on, but I almost would rather sit tight and then talk in July.
Yeah, so our first meeting with the Finance Committee, we'd review, we've already committed to spend the revenue increases we're planning to see for this last quarter of the fiscal year. So our next meeting with the Finance Committee would be around October, when we close Q1 of fiscal 23 to spend those first quarter revenues, and then also see where we came in compared to our projections for that previous quarter.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my last question, and Charles, I had mentioned this to you, and I'm going to do this with my incline hat on. Courtney, can you put up the slide on the appropriation to incline that shows prior year, the one line? Yes, thank you. So pre-pandemic, we're at about 1.6. We're budgeting 2.1. Just for your consideration, we are looking at a little bit more aggressive number for us. We're looking at about a 2.5 in our projections, but again, realizing that we're being a little bit more conservative. My question being, one of the items I'm going to bring forward, and again, Charles, I talked about this and at a couple board meetings, is about the need for transportation investment in Incline Crystal Bay. for fiscal year 22-23 for our micro transit. And Rick, I know we've had this discussion as well. If I look at what the increase, because this is the appropriation to incline, but there's that same appropriation ends up in your general fund, that same dollar amount, because we split that 6%. So if I'm looking at fiscal year 18-19 compared to 22-23, it's about a $420,000 increase from where we were pre-pandemic to where we're projecting today that is sitting in the RSCVA budget. What avenues or what process would be in place for me coming to the board, and I know that would have to go to the board, to request a investment in transportation, which for us in Incline Crystal Bay, quite frankly, is more important than some of the other marketing and things that are happening. Not that those aren't critical as well, but that's where we need the help. So I guess my point is, when I'm looking at the dollars that have been increasing since 18-19, there's a significant dollar amount that would cover the request that I'm asking for. Now, I don't know how that ends up in the actual expense side, so I will pause there just for thought, but that's kind of the next step that I'd like to ask with my incline hat on for a future board item.
Andy, this is Ben. So just to address your sort of question on what the process would be. So that slide that Courtney's showing is the allocation per statute. So we couldn't change the allocation there without a statutory change. You can always come to the RSCVA board on behalf of Incline Village Crystal Bay, requesting some sort of funding or some other arrangement to help you fund your transportation. But I think it would be outside of the way these funds are apportioned. It would be just like any other ask that comes to the RSCVA.
Correct. Yeah, and I wouldn't anticipate changing the legislation. That's, at least not now. Maybe in the future we'll have that conversation. But I think that's the intent, recognizing that there are increases that have been going on with funding coming out of Washoe B that have supported, the projects at the RSCVA and how we get some of that back. So it's a good look at the budget. I appreciate that, and it's a conversation that we will move into the future. So thank you.
And Andy, from a timing standpoint, I would say that, the agenda that we're going to propose for the meeting next Thursday is pretty heavy. It's got this whole, the whole budgeting process. It's got the 3-year strategic plan. It's got special events. My suggestion is, if you want to bring that forward, I would probably suggest at the end of the next meeting to put that on the agenda for July for consideration.
Yes, and I think that works. Thank you. All right, are there any other committee comments on the item at hand? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to recommend for board approval? And I'm sorry, I can't hear if there was a first or a second there.
No, this is the first. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll
Andy, this is
second.
Steven.
Second.
Rick's batting
Thank you.
cleanup.
Great. All right. And Ben, do we need to go to any public comment on this, Ben?
Let's take a vote on that just for the record, and then so let's do the vote, and then I can walk you through the rest of the agenda. It's simple.
Okay, I just didn't know if we need to do any public comment on this particular agenda item.
No.
Okay, all right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. Unanimous. Great. Thank you very much. And that takes us to the next item. Let me get back to my agenda. Sorry, I got multiple things open here. All right, we are moving on to item F. Committee member comments regarding items for future agendas, future meetings, sorry. Anything from the committee? Okay, hearing none, we're going to go to item G, comments from the floor for public comments.
There is
Are there any public comments?
no additional public comment at this time.
All right, so with that, I believe we are at adjournment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
10 minutes to spare.
Thanks, Andy.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.